Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Yes, I know I've been gone for 2 days, nothing too serious, but I am back with another author interview here on the channel. Many of you know me as Gabriel Garcia. Some of you may know me as the Wandering Quill or the Wandering Scribe. And in today's author interview, we have a first timer here on the channel. She's a huge bookworm, history nerd, and all around geek, as well as the author of the Blood and Ancient Scrolls series, one of which we'll be reviewing today or discussing Blood Triad. She's also an old school goth who used to perform at the infamous ManRay nightclub in Boston. While she still goes out dancing now and then, these days she spends more time walking her beloved terrier on nature trails and figuring out how to do that whole indie publishing thing. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to a first timer here on the channel making their debut, author Raven Belasco. Raven, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Wow, that was a great intro. I could almost hear the applause.
Thank you, Raven. Thank you. So, before we dive into your book, Blood Triad, is there anything else you would like the readers to know about you?
No, I think that pretty adequately sums it up. I've been lucky recently. The club that I used to work with opened up again after a hiatus of some years. And this summer I've been actually able to vend and sell my books at that club,
Oh,
which has been just an amazing experience. If you go on my Instagram, your Facebook, you can see pictures and video from it. But it's one of the best parts of my summer so far, actually.
awesome. Awesome. So, for people who may not know about your series, what can you tell us as a little teaser into what we can expect from you?
From Blood Triad, the book,
Blood
or
Triad or just the series in general?
um, the series in general is very cross genre. So it is dark fantasy, and there are vampires, and that also pulls it into the horror realm, because I believe that vampires are monsters and should be treated like monsters. So the monstrous happens. But there's also a lot of history and a lot of action, and it's the they just don't fit into one neat little box, these stories. Blood
Nice.
Triad is especially what I like to call a romp through history. Um, the three different novellas take place in completely different times and places, and it introduces people to three uh, characters who had been side characters and who just kind of came to me and were like, "Yeah, we're not side characters. Make us main characters now." So, um, I was about to use the word that the vampires have for themselves, which is amor, which
Ooh, all right.
brings up the fact that I've created a fantasy language for the series as part of the world building. So um, just get that out of the way, because I'm going to, as I talk about it, I'm going to, without thinking, call them the amor. So that is their name for themselves. They get a little cranky if you call them vampires.
Ah, nice. So you are really, changing a little bit of the vampire because I talked with two other guests on the show who were working on another uh monster character that's been popularized in lore, the werewolves,
Mm-hmm.
and they were actually working on their own story, which is like werewolves that exist in modern times, almost like the movie Bright that was on Netflix, where he had monsters, elves, ogres, and stuff like that, but it's in the modern day, and you have werewolves that are police. So it's like,
Yes.
how does that work? So it seems like I'm almost getting the same kind of vibe from this, which I actually like. And the fact that you actually had history in it, oh, that instantly hooked me in. I love combining fantasy with history, horror with history, and I'm really, really excited to dive deep into the Blood Triad and the other works you have in the Blood and Ancient Scrolls series. So let's actually backpedal a bit. Let's actually start at the beginning. So for you, Raven, what can you tell us about, childhood growing up, and were you always fascinated with reading and writing growing up, or did that come about later in life?
I was first, actually, my very first job that I wanted to have when I was growing up was to be the goddess Athena. That didn't last. Eventually, I kind of figured out there wasn't a job opening there. Second one I wanted to be was a paleontologist.
Ooh, okay.
And I still love dinosaurs passionately. But the third job I wanted was to be, actually, I don't know where third and fourth. The third one was to be a librarian, and then after that, I wanted to be a writer and an illustrator. I discovered that I do not have the writing, I do not have the drawing skills to be the illustrator, but I do have the writing skills. So I've done other things in my life, but ending up as a writer is sort of no surprise to anybody who knows me. And I've always, well, no, not always. There was a time where I was more interested in dinosaurs, but starting around age 12, I discovered vampires. And I think I actually discovered them by reading Dracula. Like, I just kind of skipped the baby steps on that. But yeah, after that, I've just been very passionate about them, for the rest of my life. So
nice. So then, going forward in your life from that period, what was sort of like your aha moment when you realized this is something that I want to do, that I could make possibly a career out of? So when did that mentality come about for you when you were creating this series?
Actually, that is a really weird question to answer, because it's not one I would have ever expected to answer this way. But I actually dreamed a scene from the first book, Blood Ex Libris.
Ooh, okay.
And I woke up in the morning and I went over to my computer and I started to type, and then I had that scene, and then I just went back to the beginning, and I knew the characters. I didn't know exactly how everything was going to work out along the way, but I knew how it was going to end. Like, it all just popped into my head. And that was not something that had happened in my life before, and it still feels a little weird to tell people that, because it doesn't sound real,
Right.
But that is literally what happened. So
wow.
It was less of an aha moment and more of a, oh crap, I better type this out before I forget it,
all right. So it's like a dream moment. Like, you had this dream. It's like, I got to put this dream down to page. And then that was sort of like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here.
I had been doing short stories and articles for newspapers and magazines, stuff like that. But I'd never actually, and I had one novel that kind of never got past like chapter 5. And every few years I'd kind of start, get rid of the old one and start it again and then stop. So this was, this dream gave me the story that was able to take me to the end.
All right. So when you began sitting down and crafting the first draft in your Blood and Ancient Scrolls series, what was sort of like the goals you had going forward, especially when, there have been so many books about vampires. We think that we've touched all the bases or reinterpreted them so many times. What was your goal going forward with this series? How did you want to make your vampires different from someone else's? And also, what was sort of the need you want to satisfy for fans of the vampire genre?
Well, happily, somewhere before my dream, I had heard an amazing interview with, I think it was Kim Newman, who wrote Anno Dracula. And he said that the great thing about playing with vampires as an author was that you got to go into the sandbox of vampire mythology,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got to take, oh, can they cross running water or not? I'll take this little bit. Oh, can they see themselves in mirrors? Oh, do they turn into green mist or bats? you know uh you know Garlic, holy water, where every
Right.
you could just like a Build-A-Bear workshop.
Yes.
And that's what I did. But to make mine different, I actually called a friend who was a biologist at Johns Hopkins and
Ooh.
said, okay, I want this to be science-based, not magic-based. So let's talk about how we get these vampires. Why do they drink blood? Why are they extra? How are they extra strong? How does everything work on a like? And it didn't have to be like the tightest science. Like some is a little fuzzy,
Right.
because I'm not the biologist. But every single aspect of what I kept or created or anything went through a biological scientific viewpoint as to what helped that species to adapt and evolve.
Mm.
And so it's been very easy for me to be consistent with the world building because I have that solid base of like, I know why my Ammer do what they do, why they have their peculiarities as a species, because it's all in my head solidly.
Nice. I like that. I like that you've given like, the vampires in a sense like, an organic presence because I think a lot of vampires in like media and like other depictions are all based upon like, magic based or like some curse, but very rarely do we actually see a vampire who came about through like either a genetic mutation in their DNA or something down the line. So I really, really like that. I'm really intrigued by that. So when you finally got around to publish stories in this series, what was the initial feedback like from, friends and family and ARC readers and beta readers? And is there one review that stands out to you?
Um, well, let's see. There's kind of two directions to go on that answer. With with family, it was all sort of a relief, like, oh, we know she's been putting a book out, and now we've read it, and it doesn't suck. Phew.
Oh, really? Oh, gosh.
Well, I mean, they would have supported me, but it would have been harder on them if the book had sucked and they had to be like, oh, it's great.
That's true.
Yeah. Happily, a lot of my friends are really excited about the series and support me. They were my first fan base. So I just have people in my life who have been supporting me, buying the books, posting reviews, and just being my cheerleaders since day one. And oh my God, I love those people so much. I really needed them because I didn't start indie. I signed with a small publisher
Oh, okay.
and got a 3-book deal. This was, uh, let's see, it took me 3 years to fully write Blood Ex Libris because I'd never written a novel before, and it's
Mm.
not trivial. And then one day I had every author has a story where they lost a big section of their book in some computer failure. And so I had my moment of that. And then we all talk about all the ways we back up now. Like,
Hmm.
I back up on the hard drive, I back up on a separate hard drive, and I back up to the cloud. So like, but that first time I stopped writing for 6 months because I was so depressed about having lost content that I'd worked very hard on.
Right.
So 3 years to finish from that dream to the end. Then 5 years to get placed with a publisher. This has not been an easy or trivial process in any way.
Mm-mm.
But the fact that I was so cross-genre scared off a lot of publishers, even though every single article you read is like, oh, the way to go for the future is be cross-genre, um, But with agents, they just want something they know sells. They didn't want something experimental and new.
Right.
You know, until somebody does want something experimental and new, and then they become really famous and make, you know, lots of money. But I ended up not being agented and signing with a small publisher, but they were not a good fit. And they didn't read my book completely before they accepted it, and then it turns out they didn't like aspects of it, and so they didn't market it with their main marketing schemes.
Right.
They didn't really want my brand associated with their brand, and so the books, which had gotten such a great response from, you know, the small number of people I could get them out to on my own, just languished. Hearing about them, and it was breaking my heart because I know these are solid books. I know, like, you know, not to be egotistical, but I know I'm a good writer.
Right.
And I think that these books can hit a certain level of you know, popularity and make a lot of readers have like a really enjoyable reading experience. And that's what I want to get out there. So I just went through and I was like, you know what, I'm not going to fight the legality in the moment. I'm just going to crank through book 3, you know, meet the 3-book deal. And in the contract, it said that if they didn't sell enough copies, that I could get my rights back, my rights reverted to me. And since they were doing literally zero marketing for them, that was not hard to do.
Right.
Then the hard part actually started, discovering how to be an indie publisher of my own books.
Dang. And you actually touched on something we're actually going to be talking on a little bit later, you know, the path of traditional publishing versus independent publishing. But before we get to that, I definitely think there's a big reflective question that I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on, Raven. So, as you know, and as you just said, you know, writing a book is not easy. A lot of people think it's a get rich quick scheme. I don't know, whoever thought that was true, it is not.
No.
It is maybe it is years upon years, if not decades of your life to make just the first draft. And that's just the first draft, people.
Yep.
It's then also the edits, revisions, editors, cover artists, marketing team, whatever. And then putting it out there on the digital stage, there is that sense of, you know, anxiety that you're not going to hit the audience that you want, or the hype where it's going to reach a speed bump and it's going to flatline for the rest of, you know, the duration. And then that voice of imposter syndrome comes, and it's so full of a vengeance because it's nagging in the back of your mind saying, what are you doing? Why did you do this? No one's going to read this type of story. You just made a fool of yourself. So for you, Raven, have you ever had those moments of imposter syndrome or those thoughts of imposter syndrome throughout your journey as an author? And if not, what has continued to discipline you to continue writing the series? Because as you said, this is a solid series that has its fans.
I am stubborn to the point of stupidity, and I make it work for me. That's really the only answer there is. After like some of the horrible reviews from people who, the first publisher marketed my books as romances, and they are not romances. And I didn't know anything about romance readers.
Right.
You know, and what I didn't understand, like for me, I just read everything. It doesn't
Right.
matter what the genre is. I'll read the back of the cereal box if I'm stuck in a kitchen and there's no books. So I had no comprehension of, you know, I understand tropes and stuff, but I didn't understand that there's so many readers in the world who just want to read things that look like, you know, a certain shape.
Right.
You know, and when romance readers were told that this book was for them, they were justifiably angry. It's not that I don't have, like, you know, they really want their happily ever after, their happily for now, and my books end on hopeful notes, not everything's burning. But it was not the shape that they wanted. It was not satisfying to them. And they left some pretty excoriating reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. And I was not prepared for their wrath because I didn't understand that I was being marketed so badly. It led to people hating me, or hating my books in the moment.
Right.
And so that was a real nasty experience. And now there is love and building relationships and passion in my books, but I don't even talk about it because I'm like scared. I'm like,
Right.
You know what, you can find out how much about human connection there is in my books once you get there. But like, I don't ever want people to be like, oh, this is a romance ever again. So I'm like, okay, you romance readers, like, I understand. You take what you need from books, but my books are not for you unless you're wanting something different today.
Right.
So that was really hard. But I in the process of writing Blood Ex Libris, I really discovered that I don't want to do anything else with, I am passionate about being a writer. And now that I have had characters in my head being and just running the show, telling their stories through me, a life where I don't write does not seem like a very good life. So it's not like I'm going to let myself get down and quit, because if I do, that's a really bad outcome,
Right.
So I just have to hold on to just every single day waking up and fighting.
Nice. And you actually touched on something that we'll be talking on a little bit later, but I now think this is a perfect time to talk about the business side of being an author. Now, you already mentioned earlier, Raven, that you initially started down the traditional route with a small publisher with the 3-book series. So after that period where you got the rights back to your stories and you're now going the indie path, I would imagine it wasn't, easy. Like, it's a lot of learning, a lot of like, okay, what's actually going to work? How do I market? When do I market? It's really important because I found out that sometimes for indie authors, publishing or pre-ordering your book during a certain period of the year is imperative. So with all that knowledge that you have gained and still gaining about the industry, looking back in, the beginnings of your journey as an author, when you were making the decision going traditional or indie, would you have still gone with traditional, or would you have gone with indie?
Well, traditional was kind of not given to me as a choice because the traditional publishing world is still, it was and still is basically exploding. Just as I was getting my rights reverted, that was that time when so many editors just walked out of the job at the Big Five, and all of the agents just shuttered up, because books that they had placed with publishers were just, publishers were being like, yeah, we're not doing anything with these, try again with someone else. So that was just never going to be an option in my universe, and I just had to accept that. So the choice was go indie or go home,
Right.
So I just, I'm just out here making all the mistakes and learning from them, really. The first book, the books that got republished just got out as fast as we could get them out. It wasn't a matter of getting, they had already been published, so we'd already missed that window.
Right.
So now we have the luxury, and I have a business partner who does some of the other stuff with me.
Right.
Because being a published author is not actually just something that you can do on your own unless you are, you have either a lot more energy and than I do, or yeah, I mean, you don't want to, you're not going to get a lot of sleep.
No.
So I have someone who helps me with marketing and stuff like that, but we just kind of, now we have some luxury, is like, okay, it'll take this long to write this book, when do we want to publish, to make things be the right time. And of course I'm always wanting to hit that nice Halloween sweet spot.
Nice.
But little things like, oh, you publish your book on a Tuesday, stuff like that. But it's really hard, because you have to learn how to publish a book, and then you have to learn how to run your social media, and then you have to learn how to do marketing, and you have to learn all of it at the same time, and any mistakes you make impact how well that book does.
Definitely.
Overwhelming and terrifying, and someday maybe I'll feel comfortably like I'm good at it, but at the moment it's all still like, well, we're putting this out here, and then we're going to learn all the things we did wrong this time around,
Definitely. And you're right. It is a learning curve. And it's actually something that we're actually going to touch on a little bit later in this portion of the interview. But you are right. Publishing a book and more in a series, or creating a different series, it is a learning curve, because you're finding out, okay, what is it exactly that people like? What is it people expect from me? So let's actually talk a little bit about that. So now, for us authors, when we create books for ourselves, because we are the target audience. We know these books better than anyone else.
Yes.
But when we publish them and decide, okay, who exactly are we going to market towards? The audience is very, very key. So for you, Raven, who would you say are your audience, or is your audience, and do you have a good understanding of them now with, of course, Blood Triad and more in this series? And also, as a add-on to that question, how important is it for authors to really understand who their audience is?
Okay, let me see if I can hit that perfectly in reverse order. All
right.
I think there are writers out there for whom hitting sweet spots of tropes and expectations means the difference between a successful writing career and just being lost in obscurity.
Right.
However, for me, I'm possibly stupidly doing the "if you build it, they will come" model.
Okay.
So I haven't done any market research on whether people want to read about a new type of vampire with heavily historical, horror-y, action-y books about the power of love. I'm winging it because I'm writing the books I want to read. And I'm hoping that there are enough people who want to read what I also want to read in this world. There was a time when authors just wrote stuff and didn't think about, marketing it. They just wrote novels or whatever, and they put them out in the world. And I want to do that too. I just want to write the stories that are in my head, let the characters that are in my head speak, give them that, let them, when you are honored with characters in your head with voices that want to tell their stories, I'm not going to tell them what they have to say and what they don't have to say, so, and that's, I think that's one way to avoid writer's block, is if, you sit down and you're like, oh, well, I have to write this thing that has to hit all these points. I could see writer's block coming in real fast for me. Whereas if I sit down and I let the characters have at, and let the process, the control I have is in making sure my fingers hit the right keys.
Right.
Then I can't really write to a certain end goal. I mean, I know when I start writing the story, I know how I want the book to end. They have control over everything in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't really lend itself to hitting a certain market. But it does mean that I have interesting stories. And a lot of the things that in reviews that people say is, oh, I never saw any of that coming. I started out this book, I thought we were in this place, and we went to this place, and then we went to this place, and like I'm just reeling, with how crazy that story was. And that's what I want to do, and so I'm trying to see if I can make it on that. Now, I am a reader, and I've been chugging stories down my entire life. So
Same.
yeah. So a lot of those tropes and a lot of things that make stories satisfying to readers has just been imprinted on me. So, I know how other authors have dealt with a sticky situation they've gotten themselves into writing, and
Right.
so I can, I don't like, I just put those things in organically as I write, and I'm just hoping that's good enough, and I'm hoping that my voice is unique enough to overcome the fact that I am not writing to a very specific set of of reader expectations for a certain genre. And since I'm cross genre, I kind of can't do that anyway,
Right.
like I can put in like the things that happen in my books just happen because that's what we're playing with, the history or vampires or whatever. Those tropes are and those things that readers are comfy, in reading, those are just going to happen because I'm playing in that sandbox. But
right.
I don't get to have that possible. I mean, I'm sure it's a comfort for writers who can do the thing where they just sit down and they're like, okay, here's my outline and here's all the things that I need to hit to make, this set of readers happy. It must be very satisfying to have that finished story and put it out into the world and know, like, okay, I've check. Whereas for me, I'm like, well, I've got a checklist for you, but I don't know if you want this checklist. But I believe that there are still readers who want interesting and exciting and novel,
Right.
So.
And that's actually, very, very true. And it actually segues perfectly into the next question, which is, as you said, tropes are always going to be present in all stories. And for us authors, we're always inspired by these tropes, or we read these tropes constantly in various authors. And there was one thing I always used to live by before I changed it. It was writers are liars, cheaters, and thieves. We take stuff from other authors, we make stuff up, and we cheat people out of time. But over time, I realized that I like to follow the 3 E's as an author: educate, entertain, and enlighten, because I definitely feel you can achieve all 3 of those in whatever story you want that is, as you said, cross genre. And going back to the tropes again, we've seen on countless books the next George R. R. Martin, or the next J.K. Rowling, or the next so and so. And from a reader's perspective, it's like, oh, okay, that's actually really good because we have an idea, preconceived expectation of what to expect.
Right.
However, one of my good author friends actually said that's actually a bad thing, in the sense that because people make those comparisons, they expect the author to either write in a similar style to that author, or the storytelling is very, very similar. And that is not really fair to that author, because they're not trying to be so and so. They're not trying to be like Stephen King or George R. R. Martin or Alan Smale, Valerio Manfredi, whoever. They want to be them. So that way, when people pick up their books, they know what to expect from that author. So, with that being said, Raven, who would you say are like the authors that have really helped you hone your own voice as a creator of words, a storyteller in terms of, characters, narratives, world building, and stuff like that, to where it is your own and not in a sense, taking elements from other stories or other authors?
I love that question so much. Like, you can tell a reader wrote it. um, so my direct influence for writing vampire books is an author named Chelsea Quinn Yarbrough.
Okay.
Nobody knows about her anymore, really, which is a shame because she did the original long ass series, with historical, a vampire sort of moving over the centuries through history, and being fascinating for 25 books, you know. Yeah. And I'm like, can I just be like that? Like, that's, so I have like literally every one of that series on my bookshelf. So she gave me, kind of the model, like, I want to write a nice juicy long series. Um, and I can use history. I'm doing it very differently than she did, but I can
Right.
use history to make sure that it never gets tedious for the readers. Unless you don't like history. Um, for dealing with big life issues without being preachy about it, Terry
Right.
Pratchett is my guy.
That's
Um,
another author people keep mentioning on the show.
yeah, he does this thing where you're reading this book and you're laughing, and then he just smacks you upside the head with a deep point, and you're like, oh, like, and I love that. Like, that's the first time it happened. I just was startled, and then I just started reading all of his books
Oh,
for
did you hear
that.
it?
For making history vibrant and alive, I really love Patrick O'Brien, who did the Master and Commander, nautical history series, and then good old Bernard Cornwell, who, I'm sure there's some aspects of history he hasn't, played around with, but he's just gone everywhere. He felt like playing around in history, and then he also has given me a high mark to hit for battle scenes.
Yes, and thank you so much for referencing him. He's actually probably one of my all-time favorite authors. I actually have almost all of his books. I actually have
Yep.
The Archer's Tale. I don't have the Sharp series, but I am watching the series, the old BBC series, and
Yes,
it's
so good.
good. I have I've read the Copperhead series. I've read all of the Last Kingdom series, but yeah, his works are so very, very, very good. Especially, yeah, battle scenes. I absolutely love, and I love that I always love this question because I love learning about the other authors that have really influenced my guests and really honing their writing style and their craft, which leads to another question, which is the actual target reader. And the reason why I bring this up is that sometimes the reader is different from the audience. You can target the fantasy audience or the horror audience or the history audience, but within that audience, what specifically, or say who specifically, are you targeting to? What is the reader group you are trying to hit? And I'm sure you definitely agree, Raven, that some books tend to be either mislabeled or misplaced in the wrong category, where
My
you
books
will have a
were from
book.
the beginning.
Yes, that they'll be like, oh, this is like a young adult book. But when you read it's like, there's a
Yeah,
little bit too much spice in here
yeah.
where it's like, okay, you need to pull it back. Or when it's like marketed like this, it's actually this. Or in another thing entirely, when people just hear about vampires, I don't know why this is. It's either spice romance or erotic romance for either vampires or werewolves. I don't know why that is, but that seems to be the case for at least those two monster groups. And no, pretty much shame or to anyone who enjoys those stories. But what I'm just saying is that not every vampire or werewolf story is going to follow the template. So for you, Raven, where would you say your books fall in, and how difficult would you say it was to like really hone in the point that my book is this, it's not specifically targeting this audience, it's not targeting this audience, it's here, but it's open for anyone on both sides to enjoy.
Well, I mean, for the second half of that, that has to be me crafting good a good blurb on the back of the book, good back copy and marketing it well. So that's in my hands now, for me to hopefully not mess up. I want these books to get into the hands of people who want to read them. I don't want to disappoint any more romance readers ever again. They kind of scare me a little. So for me, I've worked out that the person that will like my books the most is someone who values good writing.
Mm.
That's actually something, where they're looking for good writing. Who isn't scared of playing with myth and history.
Right.
Uh, Someone who enjoys a compelling action scene. Um, Someone who also loves an emotional workout. Uh, and also someone who might be, I mean, so this one, I guess, this last one is optional. Someone who's nerdy about details.
Yes.
So my books can either be read by someone who doesn't really care and just glosses over all the details that I've spent a lot of time putting in. That's fine. Like if you just want these books as a beach read, I'm happy. Like, yay, you had a nice afternoon at the beach, and my book, improved your day. Like I'm totally comfortable with that. But I put in almost Easter eggs,
Right.
of facts, little hints, little things where it kind of flows by in the story. But if you're like, wait, what's that? And you go look it up on like Wikipedia, you're like, oh, you know, oh. And then I use foreign language a lot. So, um, you know, I'll have, another character yell something at the main character that she doesn't understand, and actually they're like bitching her out with some pretty nasty cuss words in that foreign language. And I have a glossary at the back for people who want to know what was said, but sometimes I just leave it in there because I want you to experience what the main character is going through. And if you're in a foreign country, dealing with people who speak other languages than you, there's going to be times where you're like, I have no idea what's being said over my head right now, and that's frustrating. So
Right.
I like to kind of do the not a full choose your own adventure, but like you can either go through and where it's important and there's foreign language or the Amber language, I will make sure it's spelled out in the book what those phrases mean. But sometimes, I just have like a bad guy, yelling something nasty at my main character. And if you want to know what was said to her, you can go look it up, or you can experience it the way she did.
Awesome.
So but that level of nerdery, like I said, you can just be lying there, chilling, reading the book, and just flow right past it, and just, have it just be, sort of an upper, you can either surf along the top of my books, or you can swim down to the bottom. And I love both readers.
Nice. And that's actually really, really good too, which actually perfectly segues into the next question. But I will definitely say this, Raven. This is a big one. It's probably the big reflective question, and probably the one that a lot of my guests are really, really excited to share their own thoughts on, which is this. Now, going back to what you said earlier, how your books were originally marketed as romance fantasy, even though they weren't. And the reason I bring this up, viewers and listeners, is something that is very prevalent in the author community, whether it's traditional or indie publishing, is what pathway or what type of author you want to be. Do you want to be an author or be known as an author, which are two very different things? To be an author is an individual who is solely dedicated to the art of storytelling and not solely motivated by money. Capital is nice, but it's not the driving factor. To be known as an author is an individual solely dedicated to marketing, promoting their book, getting on every platform, every social media, whatever, to share their book and to really drive home the point that this is who I am. This are my stories that I want to share. Not that there's anything wrong going down that path, but for a first-time author, there is a big misconception in that path, which is there is no guarantee that your debut anything is going to be the start of your legacy. Now, I'm sure you probably have read other stories like this, Raven, where, that's not always the case. Some authors' first works rocket them to award-winning status, allowing them to live off of the success of that series and allowing them to make more. But on the other side of the coin, you have those who rise, fall, and never really get back up, and that imposter syndrome comes back with a vengeance because it goes back to what were your long-term goals down this path. And even for the other path too, to be an author, what were your long-term goals down that path? And ultimately going back to what I said before about, books being marketed differently, sometimes, pressure within the publishing world saying, oh, these are the hot books that are trending right now. And for a first-time author who sees this, they're going to be tempted to completely change their story or add in elements that don't really follow through in their story and don't feel organic just to join the gravy train. And sometimes it works for a little bit, sometimes it doesn't, and your book is completely dead in the water. And that, of course, can turn an author's passion for writing into a negativity where they don't want to pursue it because it's not fun anymore. As one guest said, when your muse becomes your sole source of income, it's not going to be fun anymore. So ultimately, Raven, in your opinion, how important is it for first-time authors to really understand this point that for their debut series or debut book, there's no guarantee that one book or that one series is going to jumpstart their legacy as an author, but it should not deter them from creating more stories if they are truly passionate about storytelling?
That's a question.
I told you it was a big one.
Yes. So the great thing about being an author who's being published for the first time is that you have had however long it took you to knock out that first novel, in my case 3 years, in which you weren't doing social marketing. You were not you weren't thinking about anything except that novel, hopefully.
Right.
And you had that quality time with your own work to fall in love with being a writer, to get a sense of what you enjoyed writing. You had private time with it before you were out in the world. So I would say to any first-time writer, enjoy that time. But if I could do things over again, I definitely would have built my brand before publication, and started, getting things out there with some short stories set in the world, to make it easier for my launch to be successful. If I was given my absolute perfect world, I would not be doing this interview with you. I'd be writing the book, the next book. I wouldn't have an Instagram and a Facebook except for keeping up with my friends.
Right.
I just want to write. I want to sit down and write every day. I want to crank books out for people who want to read them.
Mm.
If I do that, then people aren't going to read them. They're not going to find them. There's too many books coming out into the world every day right now. You have to stand out from others. You have to convince readers that it's worth taking, spending money on your book and taking the time to read it.
Yes.
So I don't get the option of just being a writer. I have to go out there and, hi, I'm an author, and this is why you want to read my books. So
Right.
anyone, and this goes, it doesn't matter whether you're trad published, small publisher, or indie published. We're doing this. So, that is just, if you don't like it, don't be a writer who expects to sell books.
Right.
You can certainly write and you can put them out there, and then if you're okay with selling 3 copies a year, then yay you. Like, you're doing a thing you love, then go with that. But I want to make enough money to pay my bills. I want to be able to keep writing for the rest of my life and have that support me. So I have to be out there being my own marketing and my own promotion. To any writer that's, getting ready to publish their first book, take classes, find a marketing person that maybe you can't afford them, but you're willing to invest.
Right.
That's what it takes to be successful as a writer these days, and it sucks, but I guess that's the way that the people who are serious get filtered out from the people who aren't. I'm willing to put everything into building my little tiny publishing company, and so that I can be the author I want to be. And if that is something that sounds horrible to you, don't try to be a writer who is making enough money to survive off writing.
Definitely, 100%. And also to add to that, perseverance and also grit. Grit transforms into talent, because that's the only way how we get better as an author. Because I guarantee you, as you would definitely agree, Raven, that the books that we have read growing up, as children and adults, those stories didn't start off perfect. They had to go through a series of revisions and revisions to where it got to that final stage. And I definitely think, reading these stories, again, going back to anxiety, there is that intimidating factor. It's like, our books are never going to be as good as this. You're not trying to be, like these authors. You're not trying to be like them. You're trying to be your own and to build your brand as an author, trying to build your presence. Because I'm very much like you, Raven. I started building my brand when I started publishing, my second book, and I started now going by, the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. That was initially just a podcast persona, but now it's become tied to my identity as an author and a writer, especially now on my YouTube channel. So yeah, I definitely agree. And also, go back to what you said, taking classes and meeting new people. Networking is especially huge in the indie author community. And let's actually touch about that. So when you went down the indie author pathway with this, with your series, after you got the rights to them, who are sort of like the people that you met and encountered who have really helped you get a better understanding of the industry? And would you like to give them a shout out?
I am so lucky. The author Chaz Brenchley, Thomas Roche wrote The Panama Laugh, Lars Hedmore, who does an incredible series set in the American Revolutionary War. An author who changed my life, Patrick Califia, loves my books, and when I post up stuff, he will repost it, and it's this author who changed my life. And a new to me author, Tara Campbell, who's got City of Dancing Gargoyles coming out soon, just wrote an amazing blurb for Blood Triad. I have been very lucky that some authors who I really admire and who I'm so proud that they will give me a blurb and I can have their name on my book, like, have been my supporters actively from the beginning. And I really think that it makes it a lot harder to be successful as a writer if you can't find community and support. I also think it's incumbent on authors who have achieved levels of success to raise up other authors.
Right.
And that's what I will be doing. Like, I mean, I've barely reached a big enough name yet to be really useful to people.
Mm-hmm.
But the bigger I get, the more people I will bring up with me. And that just, I think it's our job when we are successful writers to help find other good writers and bring them out into the world. And I'm going to be very passionate about that for the rest of my career.
Awesome. That's actually really, really well spoken, Raven. And now we arrived at the final question of this amazing author's interview. And it's probably one of my favorite questions to ask all my guests. And it is, with everything you have learned and still learning about the industry as an author, the books you've written, the people you've met, the connections you've made, what is your word of wisdom to other authors who are watching this video right now, or people who have a story in their mind, but they're not really sure they want to put it out there or get it on page? What is your word of wisdom to them?
If you can write, turn out your stories and keep your day job, do that. Until you hit a point where you are big enough to make real money, to have real money coming in, publishing your books is a hard and expensive uphill slog. Like, it's not fun. It's just grinding work. And the more that you can pay for help, the more that you can invest. And so you have to believe in yourself, but
Yes.
the more money that you have to help you along the way. And I wish this wasn't true. Like, I wish I lived in a universe. I wish we lived in a universe where you could just write a good story and it would go out into the world and people go, oh, a good story, and that would be enough. But that's not the world we live in. So you have to be prepared to spend money to get yourself out there. And you have to look for resources like IPPA and Ally that help authors along. You have to be willing to sign up for memberships, and like, don't think you can do it on your own. Like, get help, pay for help.
Yes.
That's how an indie author or a small independent publisher, independently published author, or not independently, but a small publisher author, will make it. Like, you have to be willing to invest in it, and you're going to need the money to do that. And so, keep your day job. Like,
Yes.
So yeah, I wish I had prettier advice.
But that is probably the most realist advice to this question. And that is a perfect ending to this incredible author's interview here on the channel. Thank you all so very much for joining us for another author interview here on the channel. A huge thank you to Raven for coming on the show. This will not be the last time she will be on the show, I guarantee you. Who knows? We may have her back again on the show to talk about her debut book that she mentioned, the one that started this incredible series for her. So, Raven, where can people find and engage with you on social media? And where can people go and buy your books to get a head start on this incredible series of yours?
I am very responsive on Instagram and Facebook, but I also, if you go to ravenbelas.co, that is my website. I love email with people, and for where are you going to buy it? Just Google me. The books are on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Alstora, bookshop.org, or if you go to my website, you can buy them directly from me, and I will hand sign them for you.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video, and also be on the lookout for my initial impressions video where I will read the first few pages or chapters of this book, Blood Triad. So be on the lookout for that very, very soon. And speaking of books, I also want to say again, make sure to go and pre-order Michael, Last Angel of Earth to receive your exclusive print cover that was made by a friend of mine. And if you've seen my post, it is an amazing print cover, as well as head on over to my bio to enroll for my ARC Reads application, which I'll provide down below in the description of this video as well. Thank you all so very much for your love and support. 122 subscribers is incredible, with 165 now. 166 videos with this one up is absolutely incredible. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so very much for joining us today and being part of this incredible series. And thank you to our guest Raven for coming on the show, telling us all about her series. We wish her the very best going forward. And Raven, thank you again so much for coming on the show and just being just an amazing guest.
I've had so much fun. I can't wait to come and do the next one.
Thank you. And thank you again, viewers and listeners, for subscribing. Make sure to like and subscribe again, and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And as always, has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, signing out, wishing you all